Selamat pagi adik-adik mahasiswa. Kali ini video tutorial tentang bagaimana respon sistem muskuloskeletal terhadap proses latihan atau olahraga. Selamat mengikuti.
On muscular system responses to exercise. When we start to exercise, the body responds. And we need to be clear from the start here that when we use the word response, it's a specific term. It has a specific meaning as far as exercise physiology and anatomy and physiology is concerned. When we talk about responses, we mean what happens in the short term. We mean how the body changes the way it's working in order to respond to the demand that exercise is placing upon the body. So a response is a short-term thing. It just happens during a single bout of exercise or during a single run or whatever the exercise might be. And it is where the physiology of the body kicks in and responds and allows that exercise to take place. It's about the function and the physiology of the body enabling the exercise to occur. And it's different, therefore, to adaptations. These two terms, responses and adaptations, are very clearly different and distinguished from one another. An adaptation is something that actually changes in the physical structure, the anatomical structure of the body. It might be an increase in muscle size. It might be hypertrophy, cardiac hypertrophy in the heart. Whatever it is, an adaptation is an actual change in the structure, in the makeup, in the stuff itself that structures the body. And so those are the kinds of long-term goals that we look for when we exercise over a period of time. It might be muscle size or whatever. So a response is always short-term and an adaptation is always long-term.
Oke, jadi adik-adik mahasiswa, ya, penjelasan awal bagaimana proses latihan atau exercise mempengaruhi tubuh kita, terutama dari sistem muskuloskeletal, termasuk ke sistem-sistem lain, termasuk kardiorespiratori, fungsi endokrin dan lain sebagainya. Proses short term atau jangka pendek itu menimbulkan respon dari tubuh tergantung dari aktivitas yang dilakukan. Tapi proses latihan dalam jangka panjang atau long term itu akan menimbulkan yang namanya proses adaptasi. Kemampuan tubuh untuk beradaptasi sangatlah luar biasa. Sehingga pada saat seseorang berlatih secara konsisten, maka di situ kita kenal namanya ada prinsip gradual progressive overload. Jadi untuk mencegah terjadinya adaptasi dari tubuh secara gradual, maka proses latihan secara gradual harus ditingkatkan.
A response is to do with the physiological function, whereas an adaptation is to do with the anatomical structure. So physiology is what it does, and anatomy is the way that it is built or structured or designed. That's the distinction we need to make before we move on between the terms response and adaptation. You need to know and be aware that those two words mean different things. Responses are short-term changes in physiological function. Adaptations, however, are long-term changes in anatomical structure. So let's get into some of the responses that the muscular system makes when we start to exercise. So remember, we're talking about short-term, single bout of exercise. What does the physiology and the function of the body do to enable us within the muscular system to exercise? So the first thing is that we have an increased blood supply. And that is because when we exercise, there is an increase in the demand for oxygen. And also an increase in the demand for glucose, because those two things enable us to provide energy to our working muscles. But how do we get that oxygen and that glucose to the muscles so that they can be broken down or utilized in the muscle cells, in the mitochondria, used through the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain, and so on, which we've looked at previously? How do we get those things there? We get them there in the bloodstream. And so if we can supply more blood to the muscles, then they can produce and provide energy more quickly, more rapidly, and more efficiently and effectively for exercise. So if we can increase the blood supply, we can provide more oxygen and we can provide more glucose. Another benefit, of course, of increasing blood supply is that we can get rid of any waste products. So carbon dioxide in particular, and also lactate, both of which are built up in a greater proportion, greater concentration during exercise. We can get rid of those because they are dumped, if you like, into the bloodstream and then carried away. One of the ways this is done, of course, is through the vasodilation of the blood vessels surrounding the muscle tissue. So that vasodilation, you remember, is where the blood vessels get wider to allow more blood to flow through. And if we can vasodilate the vessels around the muscle, that means more blood flow, more blood supply to the muscle, which means more oxygen and more glucose. The next muscular system response to exercise is an increase in muscle temperature. So we know that in the muscle is, as far as we're concerned, where respiration takes place, where energy is produced. But that reaction, that respiration, is what we call exothermic. That is, the process of breaking glucose and the process of breaking down fat in some cases produces heat within the muscle. Because that heat therefore is produced as we exercise, and as we exercise more and more or with a greater intensity, the production of energy goes up, therefore so does the production of heat. So our muscles become increasingly warm. This has a benefit in terms of our increased muscle pliability. Pliability simply means the stretchiness of the muscle itself. And stretchy muscles, long stretchy muscles, have a couple of really important benefits. One is that they reduce the risk of injury. So if our muscles are nice and warm, they're nice and pliable and flexible, then the risk of injury is hugely reduced. The likelihood of us tearing the muscle, tearing the within the muscle, or even the tendons from the bones is much reduced if our muscles are nice and warm and pliable. And of course, it also has the added benefit of a greater range of movement, which is useful in all sorts of different kinds of sports, not least for sports that require production of force, power.
Nah, khusus untuk pliability atau flexibility, perlu ditekankan juga bahwa otot sendiri itu ibaratnya seperti rubber, seperti karet. Pada kondisi otot yang belum cukup warming up atau cukup hangat, hati-hati dalam melakukan gerakan stretching atau perenggangan, karena pada saat otot temperaturnya belum cukup, jika Anda paksakan perenggangan justru akan menimbulkan terjadinya cedera. Tapi pada saat sudah pemanasan yang cukup, temperatur seperti dikatakan tadi, temperatur terutama di daerah otot tadi sudah meningkat, sehingga kelenturan otot meningkat, maka gerakan stretching atau perenggangan bisa dilakukan.
Next we have the production of lactate. We've mentioned this already, but lactate is produced particularly when we undergo high intensity exercise. Specifically, it is one of the two anaerobic energy systems. That is, the lactate system, the second of the three systems, produces lactate as a byproduct of energy production, as a byproduct of anaerobic respiration. And of course we know that anaerobic respiration is the sort of respiration we have to rely upon when the intensity of the exercise is so high that we can't supply enough oxygen to use purely the aerobic system. So the intensity goes right up in the exercise that we're doing. We cannot provide sufficient oxygen. We end up in what is called a hypoxic state because there is insufficient oxygen being supplied to the muscles to meet the demand for energy. So we use partly the aerobic system, but also partly we use the lactate system, which provides energy in the absence of oxygen, but as a byproduct we produce this lactate, which then ends up in the bloodstream. And we've talked previously about a number of negative possible side effects of a large increase of lactate in the blood, not least the level of acidity both in the blood and in the muscle.
Ya, jadi di sini asam laktat sendiri merupakan end product dari aktivitas dengan intensitas tinggi. Seperti kita ketahui ada 3 sistem energi, di mana yang intensitas yang sangat tinggi dengan durasi yang sangat pendek itu menggunakan ATP-CP seperti sprint atau angkat beban yang dengan beban maksimal. Itu ketersediaan ATP-CP antara 0 sampai 30 detik. Setelah itu tubuh akan menggunakan atau memecah energi dari glikolitik asam laktat. Nah, proses pemecahan energi tadi akan menghasilkan yang namanya asam laktat. Pada saat aktivitas dilanjutkan, maka terjadi penumpukan laktat, di mana penumpukan laktat otomatis akan menimbulkan penurunan dari pH, sehingga pada satu titik tertentu otot tidak mampu atau tidak bisa berkontraksi lagi. Biasanya disertai tanda yang awalnya pegal, ya, sampai rasa panas di daerah otot tersebut. Nah, di sini peranan respirasi adalah memberikan oksigen, ya, atau dari sistem respirasi memberikan oksigen untuk menetralisir asam laktat, sehingga otot yang tadinya sudah penuh asam laktat bisa dinetralisir atau produk laktatnya dibuang, sehingga otot tadi bisa berkontraksi untuk aktivitas berikutnya.
Finally, in terms of responses of the muscular system to exercise, the last one here is micro tears. And these are simply minuscule tears, very tiny tears in the muscle tissue itself that we sustain when we undergo resistance exercise in particular. So whenever we're lifting weights, whenever we're shifting large masses about the place, we sometimes can cause tears in the muscle. And really that's a good thing, provided we manage it and allow our body time to recover, because it's when these tears occur that the body then is stimulated to grow back stronger. Well, that would be an adaptation. We're thinking about responses. So in the short term, therefore, these minuscule micro tears in the muscle produce swelling and they produce pain in the muscle. The most tearing is caused by a particular type of muscular contraction. And think back to the types of muscular contraction, and you remember that we have isometric, we have eccentric, and we have concentric contractions. Well, eccentric contractions, those contractions where the muscle is under tension and yet is lengthening, those are the kinds of contractions that produce the most micro tears. So if you're going to be doing work that involves plyometrics or lots of eccentric contractions, braking and slowing and so on, then you are very likely to have a large number of micro tears, more micro tears than you would do with other types of contraction. And so therefore eccentric contractions are particularly associated with what we call DOMS, which stands for delayed onset muscle soreness. And that's that soreness that you feel after sort of 24 hours, 48 hours, the last sort of 2 or 3 days after a bout of exercise, particularly as a result of any exercise that involves lots of eccentric contractions. So that's it from us.
Oke, jadi disinilah sebenarnya peranan dari micro tears atau kerusakan secara mikro, terutama di filamen-filamen serabut otot, sehingga menimbulkan terjadinya repairing atau perbaikan, sehingga menimbulkan kualitas otot yang lebih baik, lebih kuat, lebih besar, atau kita sebut sebagai hypertrophy, karena adanya kerusakan yang sifatnya mikro atau kecil. Itu dibedakan dengan kerusakan yang bersifat major atau robekan otot. Ya, biasanya otot yang bersifat robekan otot itu terjadi pada beban yang sangat berat atau disertai dengan adanya hentakan. Itu sering terjadi pada aktivitas yang menggunakan power atau hentakan. Nah, di sini kita bedakan pada saat otot berkontraksi itu ada 2. Pada saat pemendekan otot atau yang disebut sebagai muscle contraction atau concentric contraction, sementara yang pemanjangan otot disebut sebagai eccentric contraction. Secara umum, concentric contraction itu bersifat lawan gravitasi. Lawan gravitasi, sehingga tekanan pada otot akan meningkat sangat hingga maksimal. Sebaliknya, pada saat gerakan searah dengan gravitasi itu disebut sebagai eccentric atau pemanjangan dari otot. Nah, ternyata dalam penelitian tadi disebutkan bahwa terjadinya micro tear atau kerusakan mikro pada filamen otot justru dominan terjadi pada fase eccentric atau fase pemanjangan. Jadi pada saat seorang melakukan aktivitas latihan beban, sebenarnya pada saat kita melakukan pemanjangan otot, jika bisa dilakukan dengan tempo atau durasi yang lebih lama, maka eccentric contraction akan bisa menimbulkan kerusakan yang lebih optimal, kerusakan mikro yang lebih optimal, sehingga menghasilkan perbaikan otot yang lebih berkualitas dan lebih baik. Sekian untuk sistem otot terkait respon terhadap latihan.